few things to note. The last couple of days, of course, former President Trump has been howling and whining and trying to gin up support or opposition or whatever for his alleged upcoming arrest over the Stormy Daniels thing. I'll believe it when I see it, that there'll be any arrests. And the thing is, why would you arrest him anyway? Because all that's going to do is help him politically. So, to me, it's just a bunch of crapola. So, but we'll see on that. And, of course, another way to fundraise, too, for him. But the New York Times the other day had an article which pretty much confirmed what everybody knew who was alive at the time, if they weren't so brainwashed with right-wing propaganda and Reagan worship. They knew this, that the Carter administration's attempt to negotiate with the Iranian hostages back in 1979, 1980 was undermined in order to benefit the Republicans during the election. And the arms for hostages, that's what all that was. So it's not like it didn't happen. Why would there be arms for hostages and Iran-Contra and all that crap if this wasn't around to lay the groundwork? Didn't make any sense. The only difference is, back then many thought that William Casey, who had been CIA director, and George H.W. Bush were central to it. But come to find out, they may have been involved, especially Casey, but were not the primary drivers. The primary driver, according to this guy, who's 85 years old, his name is Ben Barnes, he was associated with one-time Texas Governor John Connally, who everybody should know, was in the limo with JFK when JFK was assassinated and John Connally was wounded. And he never did completely recover from that. He didn't have minor injuries. It took a while for him. And it's believed that helped contribute to his death in 1993. So that was like 30 years after the assassination. But John Connally had kind of a colorful career, and I could go talk about him and LBJ. And he was a conservative Democrat who switched parties. And after he switched parties, one of the things he wanted to do is, according to Ben Barnes here, he wanted to be Secretary of State, I think it was, under Reagan, or under a Republican administration. So he pulled a Richard Nixon, although Richard Nixon was a lot more clever and used third parties when he sabotaged the Paris peace talks. But he decided in 1968, but Connally decided he was going to pull a Nixon and violate the Logan Act and interfere with the hostage situation in Iran, promising the Iranians a better deal if they withhold the hostages. It's the blueprint. The Chanel affair was the blueprint for this. So it's like the Republicans can't win honestly in an election. So those hostages were there extra months in order for the Republicans to benefit. And Jimmy Carter was so wrapped up in this, he couldn't really be bothered with his re-election campaign. He was so focused on that. Well, anyway, this Ben Barnes character decided 43 years after the fact that he would come clean about it because his conscience was eating away at it. Because after all, former President Carter is in hospice. He's 98 years old. And he wanted to make amends. Well, I guess better late than never, but still, he had all those years to tell the truth, and that the culprits could have been dealt with. But the media kind of poo-pooed the October surprise, which was a Republican or rather a Reagan campaign informal thing to call it, or GOP, whatever, to describe what happened. But it did happen. I mean, we all knew that. Carter knew that. His assistants knew that. They knew it. And there were witnesses to this to back up this Barnes' story. So, you know, the fact of the matter is the GOP cannot win an election fairly. They can't do it anymore. The demographics are not there anymore, and they've known this for decades, that the demographics are not there in their favor. So they've tried to rig the courts, they've tried to rig the legislatures, and gerrymandering has really screwed things up, because you've got these absolute batshit people that are in the legislatures and are in Congress that a generation ago they would never have been elected to anything. And now they're just absolutely nuts. And that includes people like Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who is pandering, and, you know, there's nothing worse than a woman selling other women out. And she's selling other women out by trying to create a monument to the unborn, to a bunch of little blobs on the state capitol, a religious belief on government property, taxpayer finance property. You go figure. You go stinking figure. And I think it's Tennessee that has a similar crackpot idea. Why not have a monument to women who've died of illegal abortions? Well, they don't matter, because all you're for is to serve men, you know, and be a childbearer and homemaker, and that's all you're good for. Unless you're Sarah Huckabee Sanders, you're too good for that. And you make laws trying to force those other women to live up to some bizarro form of Christian standards. So anyway, there was that. And then, speaking of public officials, why in the hell is an elected official getting involved in this drag shit? Yes, someone pointed out to me she wasn't the first one. We had Scott Wiener last fall with his Halloween thing that Kelly J. Keene and others were there to protest. Yeah, that's true. And I don't know why there's so much backing of what is, in fact, repulsive and offensive mockery of women by making them into hypersexualized caricatures by males. Why is that worth fighting for? Tell me. Now, if somebody came out and decided to hold a blackface story hour, do you think that would last 5 minutes? Hell no. But it's okay to mock women. This shit needs to go. I know it was a part of gay male culture to mock women, to mock it. But it's time to go. It's really, its era has come and gone. And women really are not people to mock. So I don't feel a bit sorry for these damn fools that dress and drag and they do it in front of kids. That's not it's like these supporters of this drag crap don't understand or don't care to understand that it's not appropriate to sexualize kids, to force sexual content on kids. It's like they don't. But of course, a lot of them are sympathetic or are in fact perverts. So that's kind of your answer there. And then, of course, we always get these articles of what stands in the way for equal pay for women. Is it really a mystery? They're not popping in and out. This article has the same old cliches about, well, they're in the lower paid careers, they take time off to have babies, the men don't help around the house. That's not the reason. Okay? That's not the reason. Because women will never receive equal pay to men for the same kind of work, for comparable work, for work that's even more skilled and requires more education and experience. It will always be that way. And the reason it'll always be that way is because men will not allow it. And the reason men will not allow it is because if women are independent of men economically and they don't need them, then they don't get laid. Men don't get laid. Their dicks are not happy. And the whole point of underpaying women is to force an economic dependence on men. I mean, it's a fact. It's a fact that they refuse to look at. It's a fact. Because any time that a male-dominated profession or line of work becomes female-dominated, the pay goes down. They don't have an explanation for that. They don't have an explanation for why the poorest people, at least in this country, the poorest elderly are never married women who've worked all their lives. And they're denigrated in old age. They have no explanation why there are certain jobs are primary wage jobs and certain jobs are secondary wage jobs. They have no explanation for that. They have no explanation of what the family wage was and is, which makes many male occupations, if not most of them, inflated pay, especially so-called blue-collar work. And if there's really a narrowing of the wage gap, it's because male pay isn't keeping up. Because over the past 40 years, because of outsourcing of whole industries have been outsourced to third world countries, much to the detriment of the planet. Because most if not all of these third world countries or other countries like China and India, they don't have the regulations, the environmental regulations, and so our planet is suffering because those countries have gone from agricultural to highly industrialized in such a short time, but without the regulations. Remember, it's something like 1/4 of the world's population lives in just 2 countries, China and India. And that's just a fact. And international corporations have gone around and for years were shopping for the cheapest labor. And right now, the big one is Vietnam. That's a big one now, where you see things made. And they just keep shopping around. And of course, Friedmanism doesn't work. Oh, sure, it made a few people at the top richer, but everybody else poorer. And they thought, well, you could go from country to country to find, God, it was such a crackpot bunch of shit. Because the problem is, if you don't pay people enough to begin with, how the hell are they going to buy your products? How the hell are they going to have the money to buy it? If we're just nothing but consumers, where's the money going to come from? Crackpots. All to help the rich. That's off on a tangent on this. But every time we talk about this, we know what it is. Women are paid less because they're women. They're always denigrated. They always will be denigrated. And they are because men want it that way. And it's twofold. Well, it's actually primarily sexual access. It's primarily easier sexual access if you can starve women into economic dependence. But also it creates, if you shut off higher paid work to women, by and large, that benefits men there too. It's heads I win, tails you lose. And it isn't because they just choose low-paid careers. They don't choose to be low-paid. The so-called lower-paid jobs, like teaching, nursing, all that, journalism, library work, social work, etc., they're female-dominated. Those are generally the better jobs. They're really the better jobs. And they're better than working in construction or logging or plumbing or carpentry or any of those. They're more highly skilled. But they're denigrated because women do it. Because women aren't supposed to be primary wage earners. They're secondary. If they work at all. And all the blather about making it easier or giving stay-at-home mothers more money when they're already subsidized, is just a slap in the face for those of us who have toiled all our lives, and we have to continue toiling all our lives till well past retirement. It's a damn slap in the face. It doesn't do anything to solve the problem. I feel like I'm in a damn time warp from the early 70s when this stuff was when it was being peddled why they were making less money. But it's the same thing now. 50, 60 years later, it's the same thing now. And the truth of the matter is, men don't want women to make enough to live independently. They don't get it. They don't get the sexual access. They don't get the free domestic labor because men do not pull their weight, and they never will in the home. Rarely, very rare that they do it. They'll never do it. Because it's all beneath them to do it. They've been taught, they were coddled by their mothers to think, well, you could go out and play, you could go out and have fun, you could do this and that, and your wives will do the housework for you. They'll cook for you. They'll do all that. You don't have to do any of it. All you have to do is provide and protect, which protection's a joke. But that's what it is. So, no mystery, no shit Sherlock on this or on the October surprise, and the same old bullshit here about the anti-abortion nutters, and the same old bullshit here about Drag Story Hour, and that is all.